This is Dr. David Albert at the Digital Health Summit at CES 2019, and I'm honored to have Geoff Starr here as a partner with Cooley, one of the major technology law firms in the country, and is out of their Princeton office, and he's going to talk with us today about the state of the digital health milieu in terms of venture capital, financings, M&A, et cetera. Geoff, welcome, and tell me a little about yourself.
Sure, thank you, Dave. So as you said, I'm a partner with Cooley in our Princeton office. I work with companies that are operating in tech-focused industries like digital health. I spend a lot of time working with those companies in their financing transactions, and I also work with the investors that fund those companies. In addition to that, I also have a pretty strong practice working with companies through transitional events like M&A as well as public offerings.
Well, you know, we here at CES now, we see a number of digital health companies, startups, up to the Philips and the J&Js of the world that I've been talking to. Tell me, I read from Rock Health that it was a big year for venture financing of digital health companies. Is that what you see at Cooley?
Yeah, absolutely. Last year, 2018, was the largest year for digital health funding. In the aggregate, digital health companies raised over $8 billion, which was a $2 billion increase from the prior year. We also saw an uptick in deals as well. And it really was across the board in all sectors. And there are particular sectors that attracted more investment than others, but overall, a lot of activity, and it was a great time to be raising money for digital health companies.
Yeah, and you know, on the other end of that spectrum are the exits, whether it's M&A exits or IPOs. How do you all view, you know, from the venture lawyer perspective, how do you view that? Are we getting to a point where we'll begin to see more exits?
So it's still an early and young industry generally. The M&A activity that we saw last year was rather steady. It wasn't as robust as we've seen in the past, but that generally tracked, I think, broader macroeconomic trends just across the board in all industries. As these sectors within the digital health industry matures, I think we're going to see more activity. This last year, we saw the greatest activity within EHR and clinical workflow companies, as well as genomics and data analytics. And that makes some sense in that those were the companies, the types of companies that were funded earliest on in this revolution, this digital health industry that's been created. And so it makes sense that there is more activity in those types of industries as opposed to telemedicine and consumer-facing type of companies that are still in the earlier stages of its development.
Sure. Well, I think, you know, we've had some, like Wall Street, there have been some ups and downs with digital health companies, certainly ones that have gone public, and I think it's part of the maturation process.
Sure.
So, you know, there are names here, we won't name names, but there are names here who have found the public markets to be more challenging than not as their markets change.
That's right.
And as people like Apple and in the near future, Samsung become bigger and bigger players, obviously that stresses the market. So how do you see, how's the venture capital industry? Are there specialized digital health people you work with, or you know, the large firms, the Sequoias, the Kleiner Perkins, who's funding?
So it's a pretty broad scope of funds that are investing in digital health these days. And one of the interesting things you see when you look at the scale and the scope of who's actually investing in this market is you do see a lot of name brands like the Kleiners, like the Sequoias of the world. Not necessarily funds that you would typically associate with healthcare, but generally have a deep technology background that is helping to influence how they're viewing the market. We're also seeing some traditional life sciences funds like the Polarises and the Canaans of the world that are moving into digital health and as repeat investors, not just one and done and moving on or as a novelty. They're really getting into the weeds as well. And then we're seeing some tech-focused funds like First Round Capital, which invested in 5 or 6 companies last year in digital health, which I think shows the seriousness with which the tech venture world is really taking this industry.
I think, and it's parallel with the fact that you have companies like Johnson & Johnson and Medtronic and the pharmas who are all integrating digital health throughout their businesses. And so that leads those investors who've been life science or the technology investors to sharpen their focus and to begin to fund digital health companies.
Absolutely, and the pharmaceutical companies, the med device companies, they've really been very, very active as of late. I think they all realize the need for digital strategies. I mean, we saw Roche in its acquisition of Flatiron for close to $2 billion, right? And the CEO of Roche now refers to his company as a pharma and data science company, which just gives you a sense of the mind that exists within the C-suite of most of these pharma companies these days. They understand the need for digital strategy. And I think ultimately that's where we're going to see, from a venture perspective in these companies, is where the ultimate exit opportunities really are going to lie.
Thank you. Well, that's great. Again, had Geoff Starr from Cooley and talking to us about the state of digital health venture and M&A. This has been Dr. David Albert at the Digital Health Summit, CES 2019, hosted by Living in Digital Times. Thank you.